Welcome to the fourth event of Pandemic Space at the Schauraum B. Pandemic Space, how to continue with COVID-19. Plaza Architects use the Schauraum B since 2009 for the 13th time in series for the discussion of contemporary topics always related to architectural aspects or with architectural aspects. I welcome you to today's lecture of Tatiana Bilbao, Living Space for Everyone in Pandemic Times. I want to give this series kind of a frame and speak of the content. The pandemic space unsettles us on many levels: financial crisis, climate change, democracy and filter bubbles, Black Lives Matter, and resource shortages. The fragility of the world and the unpredictability and limited influenceability of developments become very directly perceptible. Globalization as an economic efficiency drive the risk trade-offs of our actions are up for discussions. Digitalization is advancing very fast, and this is precisely what has a major impact on our mobility, our coexistence, and our forms of work and life. How does this all affect our space on the level of the city, the agglomeration, and the villages, on different continents? And what are the challenges and consequences for future building, education, health, work, leisure, culture, and housing? As the pandemic goes on, questions arise. What influence do pandemics exert on space? And with this also fundamentally, in what form do we want to, and do we conduct architectural discourse at all in the future? For this urgency, we developed the event series that we are now in. At the same time, we kind of experiment with different forms of testing and testing of how to exchange knowledge and how to come together, how to discuss topics like this in a pandemic environment. Now to Tatiana Bilbao. She began her studio in 2004 with the aim of integrating social values, collaboration, and sensitive design approaches to architectural work. The work of the office intersects with research allowing to design for diverse circumstances and in the reconstruction or crisis scenarios. The working method uses hand drawing and models to keep design development rooted in the spatial and not in the digital. Before, Tatiana was an advisor in the Ministry of Development and Housing of the Mexican government in Mexico City. She held teaching positions and got various prizes all over the world. Now we welcome Tatiana Bilbao for her lecture, and we are very happy that you are here. Tatiana, please.
Thank you very much, Christian, and thank you very much, the Schauraum B Forum. I think for me it's a very special opportunity to speak on many of the topics that I have been researching the past years, but obviously had been intensified the past year and a half, the past pandemic. Even though I think that for me the most intense month was July, after seeing these two images that for me represent July 2021 and will keep in my mind. One of a guy that decided that investing all his money in exploring the possibility of taking tourists to the space And the other one of a woman, the most important and the most condecorated gymnast in the world, decided to quit Olympic Games in many of the fields that she was going to participate. This tells a lot of things about where we are as society. On one side, there's really a part of the society who is not looking back and not taking in account the place where we are, what we have done to the planet and what should we do to the future. And then there's others that start to understand that our care and our personal mental health is the most important thing and the most valuable thing we have in the world. In recent years, the city, and citing Pier Vittorio Aureli in the introductory essay in the book, The City as a Project, it has come very popular, and we have grown through the mantra, more than half of the people live in urban centers. Nevertheless, this has not been enough for us architects or anyone to be able to imagine the possibilities of the city. We have not gone through the process of understanding that we need to act urban and planning-wise. The city, and it's because it's told, grows organically. And there are many forces that pull, and then it's impossible, therefore, for us to imagine. They have become unbearable, huge, and unthinkable. But again, coinciding with Aureli, there's an hyper big contradiction. The space of the city shapes us, shapes the future, and shapes our possibilities on it. So it is true that we need to understand that it's urgent to act in the city as planners, as thinkers, as sociologists, as economists, as financiers, as anyone, as all of us in society. We need the cities because we're human beings that need each other to exist. We don't exist by ourselves. So we definitely need these collective settlements to exist. In every city, there are infinite cities. Every time that we think on a city, we should not think on a vast and limited space. It is true that it's infinite cities, and that could be called organically growing. But those forces that make the cities grow have nothing of organic and nothing of innocent. These forces are forces of production and capital. And these forces are every day more and more leaving more people out of the possibility of existing in the city. The city is not going to disappear. What is going to disappear is us in the city. So we definitely, as architects, urbanists, and planners, it's not only a time to defend the city, it's a time to make the city possible for everybody. The city that we live on today is the reflection of the society of production, the one that was built upon the construction of the use of fossil and carbon energy. This in Elisa's Iturbi ensayo, Architecture and the Death of Modernity of Carbon, is clearly explained, and it has not changed since the past 200 years. Probably we have seen different shapes of the carbon city, the early 20th city, dispersed, deorganized, unsanitized city of the pre-industrial time, then the city of the modern time, then the postmodern, and now the contemporary city. But those have a basic single thing that they share, a city that is fueled by carbon fossils. We definitely need to overcome that, and to see probably in the future, hopefully very soon in the future, the post-carbon city. For me, that post-carbon city obviously needs to urgently understand how to base its production and not using carbon fossil energy. But that is not the only thing we need to overcome. It's definitely very important that we find different types of social relationships that enable the possibility of existence in the city. And this is where I would like to really focus. I think the pandemic did not cause the things that we are actually today living in the city. The pandemic exposed them, and of course, it took advantage of them. Today, I think the other mantra, the new mantra, is imagining the city post-COVID. I think that it's urgent that we imagine the city post-carbon form, and for me, it's called the city of care. And the city of care has the house in its core. And I believe that the understanding of the home, it's a most fundamental act on these times. Relying that the whole world now believes on the modern notion of living, it's really urgent that we try to think how this house has really affected the way we live. It's obviously a house that has responded to the city of production. It's done and it's based, and it has its origin in three frictions, as Fernanda Canales says. The house as a place of rest, as if work could be separated from life, and housework would disappear. The house as a private property within everybody's reach, as if when considering it a commodity, it would not be determined by market-driven dynamics, making it unaffordable to the majority. And the house as a sanctuary for the nuclear family, husband, wife, and children, as if there were no other forms of coexistence, and private and public were two independent fractions. I believe that reimagining the house is the base of the possibility of erasing discrimination that comes from the core of the house. There is a very important rely on that capitalism has, its work. The society today relies on production. We don't exist if we don't produce. The irony is that to produce, we need to exist. And therefore, the most important aspect of our existence is not considered as productive labor, and it's not paid. This is domestic and reproductive labor. This is today done 80%, and I would like to think that it's even more, of it by women. Women are relegated to the housework as if this was no work and it's not paid. This, obviously, it's an important fact to put on the table to erase discrimination towards women. But if we don't understand that house care and reproductive work has to be done by someone, anyone, regardless of the gender, and it's not paid and it's not recognized as labor, it's going to always be discriminative. I believe that understanding different types of social relationships, we can overcome these. I don't think we're gonna change so fast into another system that is not relying on production and relegating housework to an unpaid labor. But I believe that we could, at least architects, imagine different possibilities for spaces that allow for different social relationships. And it is not only about wages for housework, which is a very important one, but it's also about understanding how we can overcome the process of private property, although it even exists, imagining how to really live together in a much more sustained way than just boxes for living. And one of the most important aspects, I believe, is that the pursuit of the 20th century was that of, through democracy and equality, achieving the possibilities for opening opportunities for all of us. I believe today that it is imperative that we think how to bring democracy and equality for everybody, but through accepting the differences of each of us. We certainly all need to do and have the same physical necessities, but none of us do them the same and haven't in the same way. I believe that it's urgent that we allow room for these possibilities to happen, much more than what has happened today. In my country, in Mexico, housing is a constitutional right. Every family has the right by the 4th article of the Constitution in the 1st chapter, to enjoy a dignified and it's what it says, every family has the right to enjoy a dignified and decorating housing. The law, a place of living. The law will establish the instruments and the support necessary to fulfill these. Then the law defines what a house is exactly. The house is defined as a place where there are the activities of reunion or rest, and that need to have the minimum dimensions of surface, height, and ventilation, and illumination that are considered in the construction code. But also, they should have as minimum 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen, 1 living space, 2 bedrooms, according to the laws of Mexico. This describes a specific form of living. This obviously allows for very little more than the heteropatriarchal family. This is becoming also maximums. The law says minimums, but this is the maximum normally that every individual can get. This is sold as the ultimate possibility for you to living. But these boxes for living are killing really the possibility of life and therefore of existence. These people have to travel for 3 hours to go to work, to come back for 3 hours in 3 different types of transport, to only be able to sleep for maybe 3 or 4 hours in these boxes and then go out again. These people cannot stay home now in the pandemic. We'll need to go out in order to get back, to keep paying for this box for sleeping. But I think not only is hyper dangerous that we continue to promote this process of production of living, in order to limit the social possibilities, we are eliminating the possibility of each of us to having our own rituals for living. We have understood that opening, for example, the kitchens in the space and expose them to living areas will expose labor and then therefore help women. But this is killing the possibility of trespassing the notion of cooking through history of your family, through your culture, of exploring the flavors. How come you cook in a kitchen like this, a mole, that brings so much things in, for example, a very traditional plate in Mexico? One of the most difficult things for me is that it's eliminating the possibility of the majority of the population to exist. In Mexico, there's 67 known, because I believe there are more, different communities that have even different languages. These communities, which are not recognized, they live completely different, although they have been imposed to live the same way as the Constitution says. The Mayan, for example, is the most important and interesting example. Live accordingly to the weather, to the site. They live much more sustainable than anyone can think, and that any one of us in cities could think to live. They really live through the cycles of the year. They really live rooted to the ground. They believe their house is an organic living entity. They don't have a bathroom, they don't have a living room, they don't have a kitchen, they don't have 2 rooms. Therefore, their house is not considered a house for the law in Mexico. Therefore, it's not allowed to have subsidized. It's not allowed to become financeable. Then it's not possible to grow. Then the kids need, when they grow up, they need to build a house that is defined by the law as a house. They then lose the possibility of engaging with their community in the way they live. They don't share a heteropatriarchal way of living, and they raise children as community. They don't have a kitchen to cook for 2 people. They have a community kitchen that cooks for the block, or sometimes even for the village. They don't have a bathroom to just go in a box with maybe an electrical ventilator to keep the smells out. They have the woods. They bathe underneath a palm. And this might sound exotic, but it's not exotic. This is because I respond of the weather, of the conditions of the place, but most importantly, on their social rituals. I think then it's imperative that we really think how we are imposing to the whole world how anyone should live. We have to understand that everybody has a different way of relating to the space. I believe that it's imperative that we have a new vision towards housing. I would start with the room. Everybody definitely needs a space to rest, a private space to be able to dream their most truly beautiful dreams. We do all have to sleep, but we don't all sleep in a bed. We don't all do it the same way. And definitely, as the Mayans do, we don't all need a bed. So we really need and are extrapolating our wishes of some very few to the whole population, limiting the possibilities of anyone to exist. The bathroom, why do we all need a very steady, squared room with fixtures to have our most interesting and important ritual, which is body cleaning? Where did we forget that body cleaning could become a bonding experience? When did we truly eliminate the possibility of being able to relate with our bodies to others in a place so intimate as a bathroom? The kitchen, well, the kitchen probably is the most controversial room of them all, obviously, and I'm not going to go deep on it because it has many connotations. But I could easily say very clearly that we do all have to eat, but do we all have to cook? And most importantly, do one person in our household needs to cook for all of us? What about what I was saying before? We also have completely habitualized the way we use the kitchen. Eating has become a habit. The eating was a ritual, and it is a ritual in many, many parts of the world and in many corners of the world. Where do this ritual can happen? In a kitchen of 2 meters with an extended counter where you can barely serve a glass of water? Where have we left out the possibility of different types of cooking and of different flavors to emerge? Are we going to bury them soon? We learned really this when we were working in the reconstruction of the earthquake. This was really a place where we left our inner ego out, and we understood that the role of the architect needs to become much more embedded in the production of habitat than the one of the thinker of the habitat. How can we architects create platforms for people to create their own existence instead of defining the existence of anyone, or at least what we believe it should be? We learn that for the majority of the people in these communities, cooking is a collective act. Bathing is an act of care. Sleeping is an act of rest. And definitely, and therefore, a house is a social act, much more than what we have done for houses, which is habitualizing and eliminating the possibility of it. The house right now has become, instead of a social act, a physical act that is killing the possibility of the social. We have also kind of dictate the way how this house relates to the exterior, how the house needs to coexist in the city according to the production. And this obviously is linked with the car. The car is that element that depends obviously in production to exist, but also links the so-called productive paid work towards our houses. And that has defined also the status of the person living on it. And the majority of the population aiming for a house with a garden and a garage ends up with a minimum for the possibilities of it. I have been working for the past 5 years with the Cistercian monks of the Heiligenkreuz monastery in Austria to build a new monastery in the east of Germany, in Neuzelle.
Buenos días. Oigan, vamos a vestirnos primero, ¿no? Buenos días, María.
Hola, señora, buenos días.
Quiero más pera.
Oigan,
¿Le hago su licuado?
Sí, por favor.
Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
Ok, ahorita te damos más pera.
Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
¿Te quieres?
Mío.
Hay que coser.
Ya mi copa. Y a mí también se me cayeron muchos de mi copa. Oye.
¿Cómo te pones? ¿Cómo te pones con él?
Not only the monastery is the ultimate domestic space, but definitely it is a space that allows rituals to exist in a space in order for the body to relate to it. Monastery, it has not only shown me how to understand rituals in our habitual life, it has definitely allowed me to understand what a community means.
Termina de tu sándwich. Que te doy la pera.
Mami,
Leo,
quiero algo dulce.
¿quieres a María? Chamarra, tú te la di, mi amor. Corre por
Mari,
los
¿me
ojos.
puedes dar más
Mami,
peras, por favor?
quiero algo dulce.
Ok, come algo.
Yo quiero
¿Me la como?
No.
Allá.
Entonces,
No.
esta. Este es el corazón y donde va la semilla.
Niñitas.
house as a social act definitely needs to understand the possibilities of a community to exist. We have understood through the analysis of in these 5 years of Cistercian way of living that not only the space has become really intrinsically linked with the ritual, but the space is the one that allows the ritual to exist. The ritual is necessary for the possibility of this body, of this physical body, to exist in this spiritual life. Although we not all of us, the rest of the people, live in a spiritual life, the possibility of the understanding of the relationship of the action and the space beyond the function and the space is necessary. As I said before, I think that one of the most interesting aspects of the monastery is how it forms as a community in scales. I think in cities we have lost the possibility of creating them because we have binarized the space. We have either or public or private spaces. We have institutional or non-institutional spaces. Everything has become managed by an abstract economy, capital, or maybe politics, or different aspects, but we have forgot how to negotiate those possibilities with each other, with all of us, with us, among us, and create those possibilities for a community to exist. I have understood the role, the importance of the individual and the collective in a monastery, because that's the only way they can really sustain themselves to be able to live a spiritual life. For them, the first layer of protection of that body that lives in this spiritual world is the robe. The robe, therefore, is an important aspect of their life, but one of the most important things is the reflection of their identity. The second layer that protects that body is the cell. That's individual space that allows them to reconstitute themselves every day, but also part of the identity building, the important identity building of their lives. The next layer is the cloister, and is the place where they start the notion of community, because it's where all of the monks are clashing or encountering. Then those monks already in their small community are protected or taken to the church of the monastery, which is the place where they exchange this possibility of knowledge, relationship creation, identity, etc., with the community at large. This is done in scales and through the day. They pass always on all those stages through the day, in and out, versus what we do in cities, it was just expelled out from our houses to the large collective, which makes impossible to create any other type of relationship than that of a productive exchange. We have also, as I said before, eliminated the possibility of the ritualistic aspect of life, which brings the culture, the social, the history, and then therefore the possibility of relationships. I really am trying to imagine how to create those spaces and how to understand those intrinsic relationships between those to create then cities. Definitely, diversity is in its center. How to create architecture, again, as I said it before, that allows anyone to exist and to create their own possibility of living, not dictating how they should live, but eliminating the possibility, the determination that right now the house has. And much more of that, putting the house in the center. I believe that, like very clearly is expressed by Silvia Federici, the only way of the city of the future, of the post-COVID city, or as I call it, the post-carbon city, is to make a revolution in point zero, which is the domestic space. And I think with this, I would love to open the forum for questions and a little bit of a discussion. Thank you very much.
Interesting lecture. I have a few questions from the audience and also myself. I want to start, now you talked a lot about the city. What do you think happens, or what has to happen on the countryside, in the suburbia and so on?
I believe if we start thinking on these much more nuclei conformation, social conformation in the city, the same can be happening in the countryside. Even more intelligently said, that is what happens in the countryside. We should, in the city, allow ourselves to understand how to create those possibilities of community creation in order not to erase them from the countryside, but to really integrate them in our cities. I think that we have right now a very difficult relationship with the countryside, because the city is taking all of its resources, no, and its possibilities. So therefore, this is why the mantra that more than half the population are in cities, is because it is becoming unbearable to live on the countryside, because the city has taken all. If we in the cities start to create this nucleus of possibilities that rely on our existence in the city without relying on that, I think we will be able to allow the countryside to exist as it has existed for forever in a very sustainable way. For example, and I think one of the most clear examples of that thought is exactly what happens in the Mayan communities. So in the city, you can live more or less described as the law says. But in a place like in the Maya Peninsula, in these little communities, you cannot live the same, although we are really only allowing these people to live that way, no? And I think this is a very obvious example and a very maybe binary example, but this is what is happening all over the world. I just came from an exhibition of Iwan Ban, and he took pictures of Burkina Faso. It's exactly the same thing. People in these beautiful villages who used to live completely integrated with the landscape are now transforming their houses into concrete block houses that are truly unsustainable and really horrible to inhabit.
Okay. One other question is, your statement is political in a very great sense, and the question was why are so little architects in politics, and what are, and also a second question, what are the roles of the laws and governments in this whole?
I think we architects have forgotten that architecture is politics. Isn't politics the space of mediation between a collective? Isn't architecture that? And I think that I don't want to be a politician, but I do believe that architecture is politics, so that's why I speak like this. And I've been trying to understand how to translate that into space. We have been working in different types of doing it. And for example, to start with, by not repeating how we design, kind of super pragmatically, we start a collective housing living, and we start with how many parking lots do we need, how many units do we need. No, this is obviously completely designed for production. And then how many, on those units, how many people will live, no? And then we design. We don't think architecture really can avoid responding to capital if you start with operations like that. No, so when we design, we start with different types of operation, as we have been trying to explore which types of tools we could use. And this is how we develop these, I don't know if you're seeing the screen, my screen. We developed this chart that was relating more to design a house, activities and emotions, instead of thinking of spaces that would be for individual use as a sleeping room or as a kitchen or as a bathroom, and not labeling spaces. And after that, we used a method of collaging those spaces to describe the types of physical relationships, because the space is physical, that they have to allow different social possibilities. And this house definitely is designed not for one individual, not for 10, not for any number, and is not designed to have a kitchen or a bathroom or any amount of kitchens or bathrooms that prescribed. This is a kitchen that allows anyone to create their own possibility. And I think that this is what we started with. It was an experiment. I think, and I have to confess that when we arrived to the result, after doing all this process, I was a little bit disappointed, and I thought, we could have arrived to the same aesthetical definition if we would have started with a house that has a kitchen and a bathroom and labeling those spaces. But definitely, and then I trusted myself in the process, and we continued doing research. But it came that 1 year ago, 2 years after, no, 2 years ago, 1 year after we have done the design, and I thought that, someone was interested in building this house. And they have seen the design, and they have interpreted the place in a completely different way that I would have done it. Obviously, we didn't label the spaces, but I, in my mind, knew how I would inhabit this place. And I was really surprised, and I truly understood that we had done a place that could be inhabited in a completely different way than we imagined. So I'm trying to understand how to translate all those possibilities, and I definitely think that we need to start questioning the way we represent, the way we start operations, the way we analyze the places, because we tend to think that all these notions are completely objective, and are completely scientifically almost prescribed, A house needs to have a kitchen and a bathroom, and this of these sizes, this is the correct size, the modular, which is a man, and we trust on that, and we have trusted. I have trusted for many years. And then all of a sudden I have understood that those are the things that are perpetuating the impossibility of the majority of the population to exist.
Now you come from one of the largest cities in the world, Mexico City. What kind of scale of community do you envision, or what is a human scale also in these projects? How many people can actually dwell together? Is there something, or can we overcome that, or does this change? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I definitely think, I don't have the answer for that, obviously, and I don't think anyone can have it, but I definitely think that the understanding of the scaling of the relationships is what it's going to make collective living sustainable. So it's impossible to govern a city for 22 million, But it's very possible to create blocks of people that are self-sustainable and self-governed, that then can depend on the next levels. I always use the example of Switzerland because I believe in this place, there's very few people who know who's the president of Switzerland. Maybe you do, but outside in the world, we don't. And it's because for you, it's very important, the local representation. Obviously, this can happen in Switzerland. You're 7 million people, right? And that's the key, because you're 7 million people. It's impossible to think there can be a democracy that works with 400 million people, like in the US, or like with 125 million people like in Mexico, or a city that can be governed by one person of 22 million. So if we really go back to the origins of democracy, is the possibility of representation. So we need to start again to escalate those possibilities of relationships, the same spatially. What I was explaining, we need to understand how to create those spaces that are in between the private and the public, and stop binarizing, and stop saying, okay, we need more spaces for the common to happen, for those relationships that need to happen in a stronger way, in a smaller collective. So in this way, I don't think there could be an infinite of possibilities of people living in the same area, But they need to really be more bounded together by this possibility of scaling their relationships. A
question I have, you spoke about the ideal of this monastery and started from the robe and so on. Did you live yourself, or did you experience to be in the monastery?
Yes, these 5 years have been amazingly eye-opening, I think. I have been living both in the monastery in Heiligenkreuz, and I have experienced the monks living in a non-monastic way, and how difficult, how has that been, no? And then I have understood all those important aspects of the link and the bond between their life and the space, you know, and this space that is very specifically designed. And I have, as I said, understood and experienced myself this notion of, you know, kind of being taken to my individual space and being brought out to the collective in a staged way that is so great. I would like to think that this is a possibility for cities.
So maybe this is a kind of an ideal way and an ideal community and an ideal scaling of how to live together with nature and people.
Well, I'm not saying the monastic life is ideal, by no means, but I think that there are many notions there that can give us a lot of hints, no? And one of them is what I was explaining, that I think there are no binaries, no? There are spaces for the grays, which in society we have left out. And this in cities, no? There is these buildings, and then you're thrown out. The buildings, they get larger and larger, so now you have more neighbors. You open your door already and you see 10 doors around in the hallway, then you don't know anyone. And then you go down the lift, you open the door in in the street, and then this also completely becomes hyper abstract, too collective, impossible to relate. How can we, architects, obviously, I believe, one of the important things I didn't say, I'm not that innocent to think that architecture can change all, but I think architecture can, again, be the platform for society to be able to change. And I think that by right now, in the pandemic, I think myself, I experienced that. We really, I hope, as we citizens realize how important was to have those spaces to share, for example, with the 3 families in my building, no? But then I have to, if I wanted to share labor with the kids, where? In my house? No. In his house? No. But there's no space, so then we cannot share anything, right? Whereas in the monastery, there are all those different stages of spaces.
Okay. One last question we got is there a city that you know which comes close to this idea of the communal space? Or in other words, what do you think are the most important things that enable such a communal life, also in terms of the very money-driven world we have?
Well, I think, first of all, it's much more difficult to live this way, because definitely one of the most important things living with a community and embedded in it, it implies participation and conflict. Those 2 things are embedded with that. And most of us, and now that we are so pampered, we don't commit to that, no? We don't understand how to create a participation, because it brings us into a big conflict. We want to avoid that, no? So we really need to be able to allow ourselves to do that. So I don't think there is, also one of the things is that I don't think there should be examples. I don't think there is, and I don't think there should be examples, because each of us relate to the other in a completely different way. And the possibility of each of us relating in a different way to the other is what I think needs to happen in the future. Right now, we are standardizing everything, homogenizing everything. No? Democracy is what it works for everybody. Well, in a 400 million people country, democracy, as you could see in the United States, is falling apart, no? For many reasons. So how could you, definitely representation is what we want, definitely the possibility of the voice of everybody is what we want. How to do it in the society today and in the different societies today, no?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for also to answer these questions, and I think we come to an end, and I would like to make a little appointment for our next event. So great, thank you very much. So first of all, thank you very much, Tatjana, for this great lecture. We are very happy that you came actually also here. It was not planned, so we thought that we have to broadcast from Mexico, and it was a big surprise. Thank you also Martin Schaffner and Max Spielmann from the Hyperwork for the whole technical realization of these broadcasts and the good cooperation. Also, thanks for the support of Savida and the Christoph Merian Foundation that makes this happen for us. And to the very last, at the 1st of September, we speak of dritte Orte and Corona, of third spaces, here in the showroom B, again on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Daniel Hanni, which is founder of Unternehmen Mitte, and Rodrigo Grönquist, that is Beauftragter für Jugendfragen des Kanton Basel-Stadt. And we will have a talk with the title Soziale und räumliche Distanz, where this pandemic has a great impact. So here is this announcement for the lecture, and at the end, again, thank you very much for being with us, and see you at September 1st. Good evening.